All right, so basically we got together and we decided that we wanted to do something different, which is go on an English canal boat cruise. And the route that we decided to take was something called the Four Counties Ring. We'll go into that in a little bit, but this is more or less in the heart of old England, where the Industrial Revolution and the Pottery District, pardon me, started up. And we rented out a boat and we spent 2 weeks going around the circle, roughly between Birmingham and Manchester. If you drove around that area, you could probably do it in about 3 hours. So we're not talking a long, long distance. A narrowboat is not designed for speed. These boats initially started out hauling out cargo. Initially, it was coal, then it became pottery and more industrial equipment. And over about a century or so, they dug out numerous canals all throughout the middle of England. And if you can see on this little map here, more or less in the heart of England between Manchester and Birmingham, there you see the Four Counties Ring. Now, the way to book, we actually went through a company called Waterways, but if you just go on to Google and look up narrowboat vacations, you'll find a number of companies that'll basically rent out boats for you. And these boats are in different marinas. They suggest different kinds of routes that you can take. And they also suggest timelines. The Four Counties Ring that we took, we spent 2 weeks on the boat moving around. You can do it faster. We actually met another couple en route who were doing the same Four Counties Ring, but in 1 week. And that was actually too fast because they had to spend all of their time just going from one stop to the next to try and circumnavigate everything in time. Whereas we had enough time that we could actually hang around different towns and explore them in depth. That was, I think, the hardest thing to learn on this cruise, and that was just to slow down. Because even the first few days when we were there, I thought I was going at a reasonable pace, and then we'd see people moored off to the side of the canal, sometimes private, and they'd come yelling out, "Slow down, take over speed." I think I was doing maybe 3 or 4 knots. The real speed should be no more than 2 or 3. You literally can walk alongside the canal boat as you cruise down the canals. So this is actually pictures at the marina where we went in. We started off at a little town called Wrenbury, which is near the border with Wales. And you can see why these boats are called narrow boats. They are long and narrow. Because we were traveling with our friends, we opted on a little bit of a larger boat, 66 feet long, 7 feet wide. So they are, in fact, quite literally narrow boats. Oh, sorry, there. And there you see them docked. Yeah. Oh, just organizing the mouse here. So there are smaller sizes available too. There are even wider boats. There are some available for hire that are 10 feet in width, but if you use those, then you find that you're going to be very limited with where you can go.
You're going to see in some of the, as we're going through some of the locks, you're going to see why a 7-foot boat is a better choice.
And here you can see, this is the inside of the boat. So it's actually well appointed. We're near the bow, looking toward the stern. There's a common settee and eating area. Behind that, we have a galley. And it's well appointed with a stove and burners and kettle and kitchen. Up on the top there, you can actually see a TV screen. I think we turned that on once at the end of our vacation just to see what was going on in the world. Here we are looking forward. And it's hard to see, but they actually have like hot water radiator heaters in there. So the boat does stay warm even on cold days. You just basically leave it on battery power and it'll warm things up. This is one of the cabins. Dahlia and I had the aft cabin, which is near the cockpit going to the stern. Craig and Michelle had a forward cabin, same size. So you do have, it's behind doors, so you do have privacy. You actually end up with two, I'm going to call them bathrooms, not heads, because you get a shower, you get toilet, sink, a lot of creature comforts on this boat.
There was even a tub. So before we start, we need to look at some very important rules for the canal.
I don't know if you can read that, but it says turn around, breathe out, and simply enjoy the view. And they do warn you that there's a serious risk of relaxation when you go on the canals. And that is true once you learn to actually slow down.
This Canal and River Trust, they take very good care of the canals. They keep them clean, they keep them dredged. So they're, for the most part, most of them are very well maintained.
Okay, so let's start off here. So here we are actually starting off at Wrenbury and getting our boat, and they look after the boat. They have mechanics who make sure between trips the boat is fully checked out and ready to go. And there he is actually helping us out getting our luggage in place. At the marina, they do give you a little like a half hour to 1 hour presentation on how to actually navigate the boat and maneuver, because not everyone who comes on those boats is a sailor of any kind. So you have to learn how to use a tiller. I think we had that down. You had to learn where the batteries are located, where the fuel is for the engine, and very importantly, where you put more water into the boat. The other thing that's really, really important when you leave your marina, I don't know if you can see this right here, you get a waterways guide. This is very much like a ports book, but this is designed specifically for the canal systems that you're on. And it has a wealth of information about the canals, about the journey that you take, write-ups of the towns that you're in with interesting tourist attractions. Oh yes, and of course, write-ups of all the local pubs as well.
You can get this book on Amazon or on eBay. And if anybody's going to do a canal boat trip, I recommend getting one of these books that's specific for your canal and doing some research on the canal before you head out.
So here we are. This is actually a couple of photos taken on our very first hop. We left Wrenbury at about 4 o'clock. That's the checkout time. And we went about 2 hours eastward on the canal called the Glangolin. This is a weird Welsh spelling. It's actually L-L-A-N-G-O-L-I-N. You'd think it would be Langolin, but no, it's actually pronounced Glangolin. And how do you actually moor your boat when there isn't a dock? Well, there's always a towpath on the canal. The towpath is where they used to have the donkeys and the oxen pulling the freight barges. And then they give you essentially tent pegs. And you just hammer the tent pegs in alongside the edge of the canal, tie yourself up, and you're set for the evening. Now, up at the bow, that's Craig. And what he's holding there is actually a winch handle that gets used on all of the locks that we'll use. Okay, and there's Dahlia. She's adjusting the stern of the boat. Now, the tiller, you can see it sticks way up. So you're standing there, it's easy to maneuver. The handle on the tiller is usually a brass extension. I don't know why that became a tradition, but because it was brass, especially when it was more commercial traffic, people tended to steal the tiller extensions. So at night, you take your tiller and you put it inside so no one can get at it. It's held in place with a pin, and you can have just an ordinary pin, and a little bit we'll show you some custom tiller pins that we got. And this is an idea of what the English countryside looks like. So you can see it's just rolling hills and just well-tended fields, different kinds of farms with animals, and numerous bridges along the way. And most of these bridges are over a century old, built in the 1800s when this canal system was being built. So here we are now a day later. We're now coming toward the end of the canal, and we're going to a place called the Nantwich Junction, where we switch over to another canal. But near these junctions and near big towns, you will always find a post where you can get fresh water. And it's always a good idea to stop when you can and fill up your tanks with fresh water. If you don't, they are big tanks, I think in the order of 100 liters, and it's just with a garden hose. So it could take you a long time. Whereas if you do it on a regular basis, it really isn't that much of a chore to fill up your water tanks. And here you see one of the first canals. We had about, I think it was 4 or 5 canals to go down from the Glangolin to the, what was it called? The Shropshire Union Canal. And you can see they're just very simple wooden boards, handle. They have a winch, we'll see that later, where you just lift up the sluice gates to lift them up and let the water equalize. Steering is always easy because you only basically have got one place to go.
You can see here why we chose the 7-foot boat. The 10-foot boats, you just can't go as many places.
And there I am, cranking open the sluice gates. Yeah, so it's a fairly simple task, but you end up doing that quite a bit. And there's Craig going down. Now, one thing you do have to watch out for, if you notice just behind Craig, we have the doors of the lock, but there's this big stone ledge behind that. That braces up the lock, but if you're not careful and if the stern of your boat is too far back, you can actually get caught up on that. And some people have gotten themselves into trouble when their boat literally tips. So the stern is now resting on that big rocky ledge while the water keeps going down at the bow. So it's an awkward situation, and it usually means that they have to call in a crane or someone to help. So that was one of the things that they told us to be very careful about. Just a couple of details here that you can see about our boat. You have different boats, and we'll look at that again, where you have different types of sterns. The one we had was called a semi-traditional because you have a small area right at the transom where the tiller is. Then you have this little half-covered seating area, and you can sit either on the low bench or up here on the high bench and just keep an eye out and enjoy the ride. It's even a nice place for the tillerman to sit. So there, now the lock has gone down and we're ready to move out. Now you notice here there's a big wide opening. We didn't have any problems on this day, but toward the end of our journey, it was actually a very windy day, and we actually had trouble getting the boat back into the lock. Why is that? They're flat-bottomed, shallow boats with a big spade of a rudder. And if the wind catches these boats, yeah, they will swing around. And there's the look behind us. So that's another lock en route. You can see there's always a little variation of it. You always have the two swing arms. You have the winches on either side.
Again, these locks are well maintained by the Canal Trust, mostly by volunteers.
And that's some of the scenery that you'll see en route. So you see different farms here. So our first day, this is our second day. We went from Wrenbury to the junction. Then next day we went from the junction to a little town called Nantwich. That took us a full day of sailing. And again, just to give you an idea how fast these boats are, in Nantwich, we actually ran into a problem with the head on the boat, the latrine, and we had to call in for help. And these various marinas, they will come out and service your boat no matter where you are. So we told them that we were in Nantwich, so they knew where to find us. Then we asked, well, how long will it take you to get here? Oh, no problem. I'll be over in 15 minutes.
What took us 2 days took him 15 minutes.
So now we're basically going down the Shropshire Union Canal, and our eventual target is a town called Market Drayton. And this is some of the scenery that you'll see here. When you see houses, they'll have beautiful little backyards coming right onto the canal. And you'll also meet a lot of other people in narrowboats, people traveling. Some people just stop there for the evening. And it's always a beautiful time just to chat with them and get acquainted with them. You know, in the process, we met a lot of people from England, a lot of people from Canada. And we'd always kind of take turns to help each other out. So if there was a series of boats coming into a lock, we'd take turns and we'd kind of self-organize who should go through the lock first. And if there's a run of boats, should one of them come through, and then just help navigate that. Now, as we found out, handling all of those locks is very thirsty work. But fortunately, there are always pubs along the way to help you out. Now, this is a beautiful looking pub just south of, I think that's
Shroppy.
Yeah, on the Shroppy, but we actually didn't stay there because that day we had 26 locks to navigate. So we bade them farewell as we went down. This is another view here. So we're getting into countryside with a little bit more forest to it.
This is the harbor master for Market Drayton. His name is Charlie, and he greets every boat that comes in.
He's actually known to the locals as Charlie. And this is the town of Market Drayton. This is in the evening, and it just shows you, I don't know how else to describe it, just the tranquility of being in the canals on these little towns. Okay, I think we're done with that one. Mm-hmm. So we spent like a full day and a half in Market Drayton. It's called Market. This place has had a farmer's market in continuous service since what, 1100?
Since the 1200s.
Since the 1200s. And the town is kind of built around that. So you see here on the canal, the left side of the screen where you see the path, that's the footpath side of the canal. The other side is the private side. And now because we're in a town, they actually have, in this case,
marina, a little marina.
Yep. And those are privately owned boats sitting there. And there's Dahlia just climbing out. We did fly our colors, so we have our Mimico Burgee there. And because, among other things, my wife is a Kentucky colonel, we also flew that flag. That actually caused a lot of questions from locals. What's a Kentucky colonel?
And so what is it?
A Kentucky colonel, it is, everybody is familiar with the Order of Ontario. I have the Order of Kentucky, and it was awarded to me for my volunteer work that I did after Hurricane Katrina. And when you get the Order of Kentucky, you get the title Colonel. And I'm also an honorary aide-de-camp to the Governor of Kentucky. And Rapscallion is also a Kentucky privateer. So it's kind of a fun thing for us. While we were cruising around, we saw a number of Canadians, and you could tell because there we are flying our Canadian flag.
And you can see here, now that we're in town, in Market Drayton, they had these rings where you could tie up the boat. And this is downtown Market Drayton. So it's a mix of old and new here. So I mean, some of these buildings are original Tudor style buildings, probably going back all the way to the 1700s, which have been patched up and repaired and modernized a bit over the years. And did I say that there were pubs available in Britain? We have about 3 of them lined up along this road right here. And you know, in the outskirts, I should say in the countryside of England, the pub is still the social gathering place for everybody. So here you see they actually have an open mic. They have a DJ with dancing. There'll be local talents there, whatever is available. That's a fun place. Here we are now going into the market in Market Drayton. So this little section here is more the modern strip mall section. And there's the farmer's market. And they have any kinds of vegetables that are in season, a lot of different kinds of cheeses.
Baked goods, meat pies, juices. It was a fabulous little market.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't look very big, but in terms of longevity, you got to hand it to them. Hundreds of years. And you can see some of the age of these towns. These are very old beams that have been set up, preserved. And this is just meeting people while we're exploring Market Drayton. I think that was another couple who were.
Those were also Canadians. I think they were from Winnipeg. And there's Michelle making friends.
Okay, now that we've explored Market Drayton, that was also thirsty work. So now we found a local brewery called Jules Brewery. In the back, you can actually see where they have their pub, where you can eat. And this is actually in the evening now. We had to do some other important tasks, namely laundry. And we found a laundromat in town where we could actually clean up our clothes. So from Market Drayton, let's just go back to our little map here. We've started in Wrenbury. We went up this arm, made the junction, went down to Market Drayton, and you'll see a few photos in a bit. We actually took a very short haul to this area here to stop off at one very specific place, a place called the Anchor Inn, which is about the most quintessentially old-style English pub that you can possibly imagine. And we'll have a few photos of that in just a moment. But the scenery along this section of the Shropshire Union is beautiful. Here we are leaving Market Drayton, and you can see a bridge there at the end of the town. More farms. Here we are passing canal boats on the other side. And you notice the tremendous wake that we're putting up, namely none.
So we chose to go in May being blossom time to see all the flowers on the trees. If you do this same trip in August, the canals are absolutely chock-a-block full of canal boats. So we chose a real good time to go when it wasn't so crowded.
Yeah, and according to the locals, we arrived in the middle of a drought. I think a drought in England means that it only rains 2 days a week, because it did rain on a few days. And again, that's the kind of scenery. Now here, actually, we have an interesting little section of the canal, which goes over top of a highway. So every once in a while, you will be on a waterway overpass.
Sometimes we were on these aqueducts that went over the highway. Sometimes we were on an aqueduct that went on over another canal.
And some people still manage to get a little bit of whimsy in there. So this is just a tree stump which someone decorated up like a fisherman. And yes, we did see people fishing along the banks. So this is now south of Market Drayton, and now you get into a beautiful Shropshire forested area. So there's some lovely forest there, and a little bit of mini cliffs along the side, which give it a little bit of a rugged feel. It's actually quite nice. So when you come up to any of these locks, sometimes they'll give you a place just alongside where you can tie up. Then your crew, in this case, that's Michelle and the hot pink windbreaker, you walk up and then they work the locks. That's actually the sluice gate, which just keeps the water funneling down. There you just see some of the beauty of the area, the tree roots coming down on the cliff.
So this little hut that's right here is very interesting. We found them along the way. We saw them maybe about 5 or 6 of them along the way. And what they are is little pantries. And you can go in there and there's maybe baked goods you can buy. One of them had a little cooler chest that you could buy some ice that had ice cream in it. And it's an honor system. So if you want an ice cream, you leave your farthings, your farthings behind, and you help yourself. And there was one that had baked goods. There was pies in there and rolls and bread and things like that. Like I said, there was another one that was ice cream. Another one had sundries like bread and potatoes, vegetables, things like that. So just a little wee pantry thing that you could help yourself to, but make sure you leave something behind.
Yeah, it was an honor system, but it was always well stocked, so people actually did look after that. And here we are going into one of the locks here, so you can see the landscape has changed quite a bit.
A lot of these canals are all hand dug because they wouldn't be getting the machinery in there.
And where are we here? This is a town called Adderley. This big building that you see on the left, that actually used to be a stop for the canal. These canals were built by hand, but they were built and operated by different companies. So the locks weren't just places where you would actually go up along one level to the next in the canal system. They're also places where these companies got you to pay tolls for going through the locks that they had built. And this used to be a toll booth. Now it's just somebody's home and with the most magnificent English herb garden that I've ever seen. And if you knock on the door, I'm sure they would actually sell you some stuff. Now going down south of Middlewich toward the Anchor Inn, we're getting into a region where we have these higher bridges coming through. And again, some of the lovely landscape along the side of the canal. Yeah, here it's so green, I'm almost expecting Robin Hood to show up at any moment. And you can tell it's May, and while there's a lot of vegetation out, not all the leaves on the trees have opened up just yet.
Lots of wildlife. We saw lots of different kinds of birds, kingfishers, ducks, geese, different kinds of ducks and geese, herons. I've treated to a very wide variety of animals.
And here we are going down the canal. Now on the right-hand side, we have the towpath, which is more or less public area. The left side of the canal, in this case, is all private. And these are privately owned narrowboats that people just moor, and then they come down to visit them whenever they can.
And we also met a number of people who were liveaboards.
Yeah. So some people have lived aboard all their lives. A surprisingly popular thing is for retirees just to say, we're going to just go on a canal boat and cruise around England for several years. Kind of an alternative to taking an RV around America. So now we've arrived finally at the Anchor Inn. I don't have a good picture of the outside because it really wasn't that impressive. It's a little house out literally in a field in the middle of nowhere. You have to walk through a gate to get up to it. And then they open up at 5 o'clock for ales and snacks. They don't really serve food there. Yeah, they
Bags
have
of crisps and
yes,
and that's about it. Pork rinds.
yeah. I tried that. It's an acquired taste. If you have a lot of beer, I guess it gets better. Now, interesting thing is, those wooden benches behind the people are sitting on, those are older than Canada.
So the real special thing about this is you see the benches and they're lining the room, and that's what you do. You go there and you sit there in the evening, and it's like sitting in a circle and everybody's talking. Of course, everybody was very interested in us, and so we had a wonderful chance. And this fella here that's acting goofy is telling us a story about a haunted bridge that we're going to pass under. Apparently, it's
the Monkey Man.
The Monkey Man is the spirit that hangs around on this bridge. So he's telling us about this Monkey Man. I think the Monkey Man story goes well after a few ale.
Yeah, I think about 3 ales into the story, it gets more believable. And people do bring their dogs, and there's Michelle making friends. And this is the heating source. It's an old coke fire. So the owner of the place, a woman, she just basically started the fire with some newspaper and kindling, let that light up, added a little bit more wood, and then she got this lump charcoal, coke, and tossed that into the fire. And these little lumps, I thought it was.
It's coal.
Coal, okay. And it throws out a tremendous amount of heat. Also a lot of smoke up the chimney, but that's another story. And you can see that the dogs really appreciated the extra warmth.
And this is where the Monkey Man hangs out.
Yes, this is Telegraph Bridge, because after they built the canals, then they had the next revolution, which was the telegraph, long distance communications. So they found it easier in places, rather than having to put up new poles, they just strung telegraphs through the existing bridges. And we looked hard, but we did not see a Monkey Man there. Here's some more wildlife, lots of herons alongside. And now we're coming close to a place called Adderley. Otterley, which is actually getting down to this area. In here. Oh, pardon me, all the way down at the very tip, I should say. And they do have different kinds of shops and chandleries where you can get all kinds of food and knickknacks for your boat.
And it's like it's a chandlery, so they've got parts and things so that if something happens to your boat, they've got parts there.
Oh yeah, there's me decked out in my rain gear.
Complete with our Newfoundland hats.
And remember I said that water is a precious thing? You can see a little black post here. That's where our water supply was. So, what's that expression? Stiff upper lip, rain or no rain. We wanted to go and get some fresh water for the boat. Again, just showing you how lush the sides of the canals are. And again, just some of the scenery here. Lots of ivy hanging down from this particular bridge. Here we actually stopped for a minute just to go up on top of one of the bridges so we could take a look at the canal down below. And because it had been a long, arduous journey, we found in this tiny little farming village a place where we could go and have something to eat. And this gives me an idea of the prices here. So you can have a lunch for about £8. sometimes £9, which would translate to what, $12, $13 Canadian.
These weren't gourmet prepared dishes. They were very home style dishes, and they were delicious, and there was plenty of it.
Yeah, it wasn't this particular one, but at a different pub, I had some of the best lamb I think I've ever had, which is just superb. I took a picture of this because of the unusual item on the menu. Second from the top, we have traditional black country faggots. Of course, in Canada, you immediately think of another meaning for that, but it turns out that, where are we here? That is an English faggot. It's basically bacon wrapped offal. It's basically different kinds of pieces of intestine and stomach and anything else, maybe some liver tossed in there, but they're actually quite nice. So don't let anyone tell you, don't let anyone tell you that the food in England is no good. This particular stuff wasn't Michelin star fare, but it was really, really good quality food. And the prices were entirely reasonable compared to what we had. So now we're getting toward the end of the Shropshire Union, and we're not quite there yet, but now we have a little marker that tells us Nantwich was 34 miles behind us, and the junction itself is 5 miles ahead. That's just a view out of the front porthole. Don't know what we're looking at. And here we have a fisherman with his gear.
These fishing poles can reach right across the canal, and you want to be considerate because you're the visitor in these people's country, and you want to get out of the way of their fishing lines. Well,
don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't be tempted to do it. They pull their lines in when the boats go by. And one time, the first time we learned not to do it is we went aground, and 3 fishermen had to come and help us get off.
I don't know what they catch there. There must be fish. Certainly, we heard a lot of frogs. And again, that's just showing you the countryside. There's Craig taking a break from piloting duties. And here we are just on top of a bridge, taking a look back along the canal. Very typical of the kinds of bridges that you see here, usually a kind of a flattened arch with a roadway on top. Now you can see here that the towpath actually curves around a little bit on the one side. That's basically a path for the oxen to go around. There's Craig and his rain gear. I think we're back to this area. Now, as we're getting near Otterley Junction, we're close to, what's down one? I think it's Birmingham. Mm-hmm. So now we're getting more into suburban areas, but you still have houses that encroach right onto the edge of the canal. Again, it's just some lovely scenery here. Let's see if I can enlarge this. That big mountain there is just a giant wisteria.
And that boat that's across the way from us is probably from the same company that our boat was from.
Yep. Go back here again. So here we are at Atherley Junction, and there's another chandlery there where you can stop off and get stuff. Now this little lock actually has some history to it. The height difference between the water levels between this lock and the next lock is all of 6 inches. So why would anyone bother? Well, this is where we're at a junction of canals, and we had different companies competing for access rights. So one company built a 6-inch lock.
So you would have to stay and you would have to stop there to pay the
toll. This post here is actually now at the very T of the Shropshire Union Canal. So we're actually right down here at the very tip of this area. And we're going from the Shropshire Union to the Staffs Inn Worcester Canal.
Say that 3 times fast.
Oh, not without a lot of ales in me. So here we see a guy who's actually a liveaboard on his boat. So here you have the directions. You can go north to Great Haywood, or you can go to Storeport,
Which is towards Birmingham, down through Wolverhampton.
and eventually London if you wanted to go that route. So there's the view after we turned. Now, I don't have a lot of photos of it right here, but we did have a little bit of trouble turning. It's like a T intersection. And here we have a 66-foot long canal boat going through a lock, under a bridge, and then having to make a sharp turn to port to go on to the next canal. And sure enough, we couldn't make the turn fast enough, and we got stuck on the bank that you see on the right-hand side. So at first, Craig is at the back trying to reverse. That's not helping. We're up at the bow trying to push off. That isn't helping. Then finally, we got the bright idea. What if we all go toward the stern? So we all went to the stern to take a little bit of pressure off the bow. The boat slipped out. We managed the turn, and then we went along this canal, and now we're on a different canal. And you can see here, we're in more of a suburban area. Even the bridges have changed a little bit here. We don't have the century-old bridges with the arches, but now you have more modern concreted trellised overpasses with roads going over top. And that was sufficiently engaging for us to find yet another pub. Now, a lot of different pubs along the canal or in the little towns, you'll see a lot of them with the advertisement free house. What that means is they're not contracted with any local brewery to supply their ales and liquor. So a free house can get beers from anywhere that they please. If you don't see a free house, then you're basically taking whatever's available from the local brewery. Now we're seeing, again, slightly different countryside here. Again, a lot of these bridges, handmade and rather beautiful. Here's an older
beautiful bridge.
Yeah. Oh, here I am practicing proper English etiquette, having my tea. And now we're in a town, I think this is Haywood.
No, not Haywood, Penkridge.
Oh, Penkridge, pardon me, Penkridge. And this old pub here is famous or infamous for one unusual reason. This is where Queen Elizabeth met Mary, Queen of Scots. They didn't actually meet face to face, but their carriages crossed, so to speak, at this area. And here in Penkridge, they show you the good old times. This is what happens to any narrowboat driver who doesn't stop in for a pint at the local pub.
No.
A place appropriately called the Old Cottage. Those beams are original. Flowering time. And oh, look, we found a pub again. Yes. Now this is in the town of Penkridge. Took some photos of this church. This place is a little bit unique. The actual foundation of this church was originally built in the 1300s and has been in continuous use since then. Obviously, they've rebuilt and added on to the church over the years, but since the 1300s, this spot has been a church. And the cemetery around it has some gravestones marked all the way back to the 17 and 1600s. So you really get an idea of the antiquity and age of England when you go through these little towns. Yeah. Yeah, some beautiful scenery there. Yeah, even some wild chickens. This is one reason why we decided to go in May. You see all these lovely flowering trees at this time of year.
That's a laburnum, flowering laburnum, or shrimp tree, golden shrimp tree. This marker is marked
1756.
1756.
And there we go. That was worthy for another pint. That was the pub that we saw earlier. Somehow that's a very common thing in England. And for those of you who haven't been there, the English ales are in fact a little bit different than the Canadian. They are served what they call cellar cold. So they just put them in the basement. So they're cool, they're not ice cold, but they still come out nice. They do form a bit of a head, but the fermentation in the English ales is not as strong as we have over here. So they're a little bit mellower on the tongue.
Here's Michelle making friends.
Yeah. So we've gone past Otherly, and now we're heading up along this canal. Which one was this one?
We already up here, Fred.
Oh, yeah. And we've already made a turn to go up this canal. Oh, what was the name of this one?
This is the Trent.
Oh, the Trent Mersey, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And where are we here? There we are. So here you see a little bit more industrial area. So we have a fairly,
the road. The canal was there, and then along came the road. So the canal goes under the road, and it's quite a neat little bridge right there. A gift shop.
Yep. So that's entering that bridge. So now boat goes down. You get to walk through this little tunnel corridor. And there's the narrowboat coming through eventually. And here you see an actual nice shot of the winches. So, I mean, they're very simple. This is basically 17th century technology at its finest.
17th, 18th century, something like that.
But it's constantly being maintained by the Canal Trust. Yeah, here we are just having a bit of a break, having meals. Now for meals, we actually ended up doing a mix. We would go to local markets and local supermarkets, and we'd buy food to make on the boat. But obviously we'd also stop off for lunches or dinners, depending on how we felt, at any of the local pubs. One of the things that we didn't take a photo of, which we should have, in the countryside in England, you can get English muffins, but crumpets.
Crumpets.
But the crumpets that you get there are literally the size of a plate. They are like this big. So for breakfast, what we do is we'd often have like a toasted crumpet with poached eggs on top. That was a great way to start off the day. Okay, we're now approaching a town called Stoke. Stoke. And this is a rather sad memorial to a woman who was captured and killed as she tried to hitch a ride on the commercial narrowboats at the time. So remember we showed you the 6-inch lock? This one here is 15 feet. So depending on the area, you get very different size locks. Now, this is a town called Stone.
Oh, Stone. That's Stone Ale.
Yeah. So this is Jules Brewery again. You can see here, it's looking a bit more industrial. This used to be the heart of the pottery district in Britain. Here we see a guard cat in someone's private boat. More pubs. And here, only for the daring, the Staffordshire Heritage Pub Crawl. If you can do this pub crawl in one session, you've got a much stronger liver than me. The same pub also featured the beer mats from all the various pubs and all the different ales that they serve, proudly displayed on the ceiling because they ran out of room and anywhere else for them. Here we are in the town of Stone. This town was incorporated 670 AD. Yep, the Queen built a church and the town grew around it. So again, some of the history in central England is just mind-boggling. Again, different restaurants and pubs. Here we are tied up alongside. I think at this spot, it doesn't really show it, but there was a pub just up the hill. They also had a laundromat, so that was a great place for us to do laundry. And while we're waiting on the laundry to finish, a great place to have more than a few pints or so. Again, just the beautiful backyards. Here we are seeing the locks in action as you open them up to level things out.
So I think that's that lock there. The lockmaster's house was on one side and his driveway is on the other side.
Mm-hmm. So here you see just a regular tiller. We have to stop off at one of these chandlery places in Stone. And one of the things that we ended up getting was this. I don't know if you can see this. It's actually a tiller pin, and they come in different shapes and sizes. We got this one in the shape of a kingfisher. Now, Craig and Michelle, I think they got two different ones, but they're all different kinds. Another person that we saw on the canal had one in the shape of an elephant. And this was the, I guess, the guard cat.
The chandlery cat.
Yes. And this is, again, the romance of sailing. 3 guesses what kind of a wagon this is and what service they were providing. And this is just, we're going north now toward a town called Stoke-on-Trent, getting a little bit more industrialized. Just outside Stoke-on-Trent, they still have a number of pottery factories. And this is actually one factory they went to. What was the name of this one?
Emma Bridgestone. Sorry, Bridgewater.
Emma Bridgewater.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see them here with the clay molds, where in this case, they're making cups. This is the backyard, a proper English garden in the back of Emma Bridgestone Pottery Factory.
We stopped there. We met up with some friends of mine from England. They came and joined us for the day. And we had lunch at this beautiful place. And they have this beautiful garden in the back. And the food was absolutely wonderful.
Again, not Michelin star, but just fresh.
Home cooked, fresh sandwiches, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, those are our friends Gerald and Denise.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see here at their little dining room, they serve everything inside their own cups and saucers,
Plates and things. There we are.
And yes, we actually ended up buying how many? About 10 or so.
They made
mugs.
Great gifts.
And we had them shipped over to Canada. Here they are on the factory floor. The ones that you see in the background, they've just come out of the molds, but they haven't been air dried yet. The ones that are lighter in color, they have been air dried and they're ready for the next stop, which is glazing and then painting.
This is Moorcroft. Moorcroft, I think it is.
Yeah, Moorcroft.
Moorcroft, China. And these are like,
art pieces.
These are art pieces. These are absolutely beautiful. Our friend Denise collects this particular company, and these are just beautiful pieces.
Yeah, but some of these have prices. I would say median range is about £1,000. Some less, some considerably more than that, but they're all individual works of art. So there we are inside Stoke-on-Trent. Again, another bridge as we're traveling away from that area. Okay, north of Stoke-on-Trent. I can't remember what town it was, but I just pulled up alongside what had been built as a freshly built canal bank with some concrete and aluminum siding so it'd be easy to dock. And sure enough, we got stuck. So there's this leftover metal wire from construction, and it wrapped itself around the propeller. Now, what on earth do you do when you have that issue? Well, the way they design these boats is that they actually have a panel at the transom which you can lift up, and you actually can get access to the propeller and to the rudder. So you make absolutely sure that your engine is off, and then you can reach in, and I managed to get this untangled from the propeller so we could carry on again. And just a local coffee shop.
Every coffee shop, they were so nice. It was just, they welcome everywhere we went, the pubs, the stores, the coffee shops, everybody was very welcoming. And canal boats are not the only boats we see on the canal. And this guy would be limited to the same speed we were, but it's a different kind of boat.
Yeah, so it looks like a like a typical power boat, but it is a little bit on the small side, and it's narrow. Again, no more than 7 feet, so that he can navigate all of the locks as well. And this place coming up now to Stoke-on-Trent was...
This is after Stoke-on-Trent.
Pardon me, after Stoke-on-Trent, yep. Going up now toward a place called Harecastle Tunnel. Best way I can describe it is a British redneck marina. So you have these boats which have obviously been sitting in the alongside the canal for a while, and the owners haven't really looked at them too long. They're flying the Confederate flag and advertise a shooting range. And even some of the names of the boats are very appropriate. Obviously a Jimmy Buffett fan. One of the things we did see is a lot of the private boats had rather amusing names and some beautiful artwork on them. I don't have a picture in this presentation, but along the way we did see one boat that was named after an infamous name that were the British Royal Life-Saving Boat Association. I can't remember how they called it. Anyway, their equivalent of the Coast Guard asked for a new name for their new boat, and the top selection was Boaty McBoatface. And sure enough, we saw a canal boat named the same way. So here we are still in the Pottery District. What you see here is the chimney for an old-style kiln. Now no longer in use, but they still have them here.
This is how close the city gets to the canals.
So we have the canal here on the left-hand side with a lock, and then immediately on top of it, to the point where they even had a little cutout, you have a railroad track. And here you see it's still in use. There is still some traffic.
Commercial traffic.
Going down the canals. Once the English pottery got going, the canal system that had been built became very, very valuable for the pottery trade, because before they would have to wrap them up in straw and send them by ox cart to get down to places like London or Portsmouth so they could be shipped overseas. But as you can imagine, a long journey on ox cart is not very good for pottery. But then they found that they could load more into the canal barges, and they would come through relatively unscathed. Oh, look, we found another pub.
Pub, my goodness. And that's, again, our friends from Stoke-on-Trent.
Yeah, so we just made them a home-cooked meal on board. Again, that's just showing the how tranquil it can be on the canals.
They don't like you cruising at night, So you have to be tied up by sunset, and it's not practical to start going anywhere before sunrise.
Because you are out in the country, and if it's the middle of the night, you are not going to see very much at all. So now we're coming up, where are we here? We're roughly in this section here of our journey, and we're going through one of the longest tunnels in the canal system called the Harecastle Tunnel. Where are we here? There we are. This tunnel actually goes underneath a town. And, oh, I can't remember the exact length, but it took us 40 minutes to sail through that. So it's equivalent of a 40-minute walk. So to control everything, they now have a gatekeeper, and they just check the number of boats that are on any one side of the tunnel. Then they'll close off one section to allow traffic to go either northbound, and once they're done, then they'll allow people to go through on the other side. And there's our...
So you'll notice as we go through this tunnel, one of the things we said about these canal boats is there's a tow path so that an ox or a donkey or a beast of burden would tow the barge along. Well, in this tunnel, there is no tow path. So they would take the oxen or the beast of burden, whatever, and they would go over the tunnel and meet up at the other side. So how do these boats get through the tunnel without an engine? The crew would lay on the top of the deck, and they would push the top of the tunnel with their feet. And that's where we get the term legging it.
So you can see here, by law, we have to have a little floodlight up front. So that's the view as we're entering into the tunnel. That's the view with the light off.
And there's the light that we just came from.
Now you can see here, we're both looking up.
And there's the light at the end of the tunnel.
Can you see here? It's a little bit blurry because, well, it's so low light. But as you go through the tunnel, the ceiling actually drops down lower and lower until roughly at the middle of the canal, you couldn't stand up straight. So I had to steer this boat crouching down so that, basically just my head was above.
So he's peering off over the top of the coach roof.
Yeah.
So the season before, a man and a wife were going through this, and the woman was steering, and she stood up and she bonked her head and she fell backwards into the canal, and sadly she passed away. So they tell everybody, keep your crew inside. The only person that should be outside during this passage is the helm.
Yeah,
so there's Fred crouching down.
You can see the top of the tunnel just above me. And here we are. We're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And now we're outside. This little boat here, it's actually a barge that they custom built for the Harecastle Tunnel. If a boat gets stuck halfway through the tunnel, engine dies or something weird happens, they'll actually go in with this boat and tow them out and rescue them.
They have, well, you saw the tunnel master at one end, and they have at the other end, and he's probably in communication with the other end saying, okay, Hermit Thrush is coming through. 45 minutes later, Hermit Thrush hasn't come through. They'll send this little boat in looking for us.
And there we are on the other side. So you see here on the outside, that shows you the arch, the size of the arch coming in. This little wooden plank that they have in there, that's about the height of the middle of the tunnel. So you can see how much it drops down. Now the other side of the Harecastle Tunnel is unique for the unusual silty color of the waters there. Again, there's a local sandbank, and it just imparts this unusual, like chocolate brown color to the canal waters here. Yeah, we're getting near to, I'm going to have to speed things up just a little bit. This area was a bit more industrial, so quite often you would have parallel locks, two side by side, usually one a little bit larger, and some of the older locks were even narrower. They're only 6 or 5.5 feet wide.
And there's the volunteers
Yep, these
painting,
guys.
servicing.
Yep.
And there we go. One lock on one side, one lock on the other.
And here we are making friends. And we didn't even have sugar cubes.
These ones are for servicing of the canal, for dredging and just going along and making sure everything is in good working order.
Yeah, just the guy we saw who's just taking a long walk alongside the canal. Oh, this is something that we found. If we take a very close look, we still have this. It's a 5-leaf clover. So Dahlia's sharp eye found that in the fields there. The 5-leaf clover is supposed to bring you good fortune and wealth. Well, I'm still waiting on the wealth, but you never know. Some old brickworks here. We're now in a little town called Middlewich. Just let me show you here. Middlewich is just up in this area. As we go back, this is actually the Middlewich arm of the Shropshire Union Canal. Middlewich is actually an even older town than what we're used to. It basically started off life in Roman times as basically a salt mining town.
When you hear of an English town called Witch, like Sandwich, Middlewich, that witch,
Norwich.
that witch refers to the fact that it was a Roman salt town.
This area here, they have some plaques here. This is actually what used to be the middle of the Roman town. We're on the main drag. There are a few remnants underneath this field, and there are still a few sections that are visible within the town, but this is a town that has been basically continuously inhabited for 2,000 years. Nearby, Middleport, pottery again, and welcomes all narrowboats. So you can tie up here, buy pottery.
Check out their pub.
Yeah, I think they prefer you to check out the pub first, then you're in a better mood to buy more pottery. Again, showing a bit more of the industrial area. Oh, we're a little bit out of sequence. Here we are at the Hare Castle Tunnel entrance. We had to wait for clearance to get in. Again, just showing some of the beautiful countryside.
Can you go back one little bit, Fred?
What do you see here?
Go back one more. Oh, there's my tiller pin.
Oh, there we are.
So that's how the tiller pin goes on. Okay, go.
Okay. Countryside, no. Some more locks. Some more
Can you
local.
pick up some milk on the way home, dear?
Again, beautiful sign of the towpath here. Now, one thing you have to be careful about when you're on the canals, you see here all this lovely section of Queen Anne's lace. Well, they have another plant which runs throughout England, which you have to be very, very careful of, and that's giant hogweed.
That's nasty stuff that we have here in Ontario now.
Yeah, and it looks very similar, but the stems are thicker. The base of the stems is purplish, and the flowers themselves are a little bit larger. And whereas Queen Anne's lace is more or less a flat flower, the hogweed is more like a domed flower.
The danger of this hogweed is it can blind you.
Yeah, it's much more of an irritant than even poison ivy. And if you get stuff on your hands and then you inadvertently touch your eyes, it has been known to cause blindness.
Michelle making friends. I think we had some leftover carrots.
Yeah. Again, just sign of the countryside. We're now back on the Glangolin Canal, making our way back to Wrenbury.
I don't think we're on the Glangolin Canal yet.
Let's just see. No. Cheshire cheese.
This is Middlewich.
Yeah, okay. This is back in Middlewich. I think was this the one where the pub owner was all sad about being bought out?
Yeah, the pubs, the old traditional family-run pub in England is an endangered species. A lot of these pubs, with their beautiful home-cooked meals and whatnot, are disappearing and being replaced with chains. And you go in and you can, you know, you're not getting the local favorite. You're getting what that pub serves. Like, for example, um, I don't
Well,
know.
instead of getting a local ale, you're just as likely to get a Heineken. Again, just some unusual sights there. What do you do with an old double-decker bus? Well, you turn it into a store. There we have some names, Rasputin. Where are we here? This is toward the end now. Past Stoke.
This is middle. This is leaving middle.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I think this is Barbridge.
Mhm.
This is another junction here. You can't really see it, but where you see the little edge of a boat there, we are coming from the right, and then we had to turn underneath this bridge to go onto this other canal. And here you see another narrowboat coming out from the lock just in front of us, and we had just enough room to moor the boat and wait for them to go past.
So one of the questions that we have is, what happens if you want to turn around and go back? There are what are called winding points, and they're not just in the canal, so that if you need to turn around and go back because you want to turn around and go back for some reason, you put your bow into the notch, swing your transom around, back out, and you're going back the other way. You do basically it's a 3-point turn.
Oh, here it is.
Boaty McBoatface. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think just to have one last little section. Yeah, here we are. Here we are actually navigating that turn to go on the last canal. And again, we went out of our way just to help each other out. I mean, everyone we met there was just super, super friendly. I don't know if you can see, but right here we have another tiller pin in the shape of an elephant. This came out a little bit blurry, but this guy had some custom built flower boxes in the shapes of narrowboats. So it's kind of cute. And there we are now back in Wrenbury itself. All right, let's just go through.
And there we are.
So there we are near the end of our journey. And that was basically our trip along the English canal system.
So we found this, as boaters, we found this very easy to do. This is a trip that I would recommend for anybody, because this was just an amazing, amazing adventure. Anyway, so what happens next, Fred?
Well,
okay, we're going to be able to have some questions, but the way we want to do it is, I'll just show you that now.
Mm-hmm.
Is if you're, hopefully you're seeing it says share, you raise your virtual hand in Zoom, and you follow these instructions, and you click on raise your hand, and I'll recognize people so we can have follow through. And at which, when I recognize you, we'll ask you to unmute yourself, and we can work through all of the questions. So if anybody has any questions, please virtually raise your Zoom hand, and we'll go through the questions. I do have one question. Was there a preferred direction? Like you go clockwise, anti-clockwise, or what happens when are there only certain places that you can meet?
No, you can go any direction that you want. We decided to go counterclockwise. A little bit easier. When you're on the canals, the rules of the road say that you actually stick to the right side of the canal. So it's just like driving here in Canada. You know, it's only these crazy British who drive on the left-hand side and confuse me.
So the canals are basically, they are usually about 4 boats wide. So you've got boats parked on, you can have boats parked on either bank, and you can also have boats passing back and forth. When you start getting up to the locks, that's where it becomes 1 lane.
Yeah, but there's no preferred direction at all, whichever way you want to go. And we took this 4 counties ring just as a recommended route. But when they rent you the boat, they don't say you have to stay on that route. You take the boat, you go where you want, you give it back at the end of your term, which for us was 2 weeks.
Okay, okay, Spencer and Linda, go ahead and unmute yourself.
That the our buoys of direction are opposite in Europe, and so the red buoy is on the right when you're going the direction you're going, and the green buoy is on the other way around, opposite to North America. In any case,
we actually never saw any navigation buoys while we're on the canals. It's just too narrow. Now there are sections where the canals intersect with, and they'll go along rivers. So they probably will have navigation buoys there, but where we were, it was strictly all canals, and you never really had a choice of which way to go.
Okay, anybody else have a question? Please virtually raise your hand in Zoom. James, please raise your hand in Zoom.
Where do you raise your hand here?
Okay, we'll go ahead, but next time, please raise your hand.
Okay. Can you go swimming in the canals?
It's recommended that you don't, because it is silty water. You don't know exactly what's been tossed in underneath of it. Every year, these volunteers on the Canal Trust will go in and they'll actually dredge out all of the garbage. And as you can imagine, up here, you get tons of beer cans, shopping carts, and
bicycles, car parts.
So
it's
not recommended. The other thing is that even at the best of times, this is very silty water. So if you ever go swimming in it, you would definitely need to scrub yourself off in a shower afterwards.
Okay. What do you call it when you go through the tunnel and you lie on your back and use your feet? What was the term?
Legging it.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else have a question? Please click on raise your hand in Zoom and we'll get going. Okay, Elspeth, please go ahead.
How deep were your canals? When we did the ones we did, they were quite shallow, because I managed trying to get around a fence to slip and fall and finished up sitting in the canal.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. It varied. I would say on average, we were probably no more than
5 feet.
Yeah.
No more than 5 feet.
I mean,
you could stand. If you fell, they told us when they were doing the orientation, if you fall in the water, just stand up.
Yeah.
You're not gonna, the canals are not that deep.
Yeah, that one section where we got stuck, the canal was a little bit wider at that point, and I thought, okay, there's lots of room on either side of the bank, but we draw no more than 1.5 feet, and we still ended up getting stuck.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the canals are not very particularly deep.
Okay, just a sidebar. Noel, do you see a face you know today? Okay, he's not answering me.
Okay.
Okay, Rob Mazza, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thanks, Graham. Fred and Dahlia. We did a canal boat trip in England about 3 or 4 years ago. We did the Grand Union and the Oxford Canal. And like you, we thoroughly enjoyed it. Have you been following the canal trips on YouTube, specifically a program called Great Canal Journeys by Timothy West and Prunella Scales?
Yeah, I haven't followed them. I have seen some of them, yeah, and it's just beautiful, some of the sites that they uncover. Yeah.
It's an interesting program because it runs for about 10 seasons. They do canals all through England, of course, and Germany and Italy and France and Europe and even in Vietnam. And they finish up the series actually doing the Rideau Canal in Canada. And the other actually good program on YouTube regarding canal boat trips is a new program, a YouTube program called Foxes Afloat, where two guys, as you mentioned, sell their home and move on to a canal boat full time, and then cruise around England.
One of the things that we recommend for anybody who's considering doing a canal boat trip is to go on to YouTube, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens of people talking about their narrowboat adventures and the problems that they've come up with living aboard, navigating things, how easy it is to do the lock system. For anybody who is doing that, YouTube is a valuable resource.
Yeah, that's what impressed us actually when we got over there. Was a sense of community amongst the canal boaters, and how welcoming they were to us foreigners. They all thought we were American, of course, to begin with, and got very apologetic when they found out we were Canadian.
That's why we flew the Canadian flag.
Yeah, and they all had relatives in Calgary.
So and so in Calgary.
but I was impressed at how welcoming they were to us novices and how they'd help you through your first 3 or 4 locks.
The one thing I think I forgot to mention is that if you are interested in taking these cruises, do your research on YouTube. You can contact any of these companies. Again, you just look them up on the internet, and they'll send you over brochures and pamphlets. But book about a year in advance, because they are that popular, especially if you plan to go in the summertime when the canals are crowded. If you don't book well in advance, you are not going to get the size boat that you want. You are not going to get any boats available on a canal that you want. So do your research. They will happily mail you all the brochures and all the information that you could ever want, but do it in advance. If you get a last minute deal, then you have to take whatever is available for you.
I don't know if you remember from the screenshot we showed you of our booking reservation, but we booked that in March, the year before we went. So we had 14 months advance for booking that boat.
Yeah, and again, we decided to do it in the springtime, because we figured we'd have a little bit more beauty on the canal side with all the flowering trees and everything else, which certainly was the case. Also, the selfish thought that if we go in the spring, we still have all of the late spring and summer to enjoy our own boats here in Toronto.
Yeah, we went on after Labor Day. We're advised to go after Labor Day, just so all the kids are back in school.
Yes.
So that wouldn't be as crowded. And that worked out quite well, actually.
Okay, are there anybody else who wants to ask a question? Please virtually raise your Zoom hand. I don't see any right now, so I'll turn it back to Diane.
Thank you so much, Fred and Dahlia. That was delightful. I just loved the pastoral scenes. I guess I do have one question. Did the water ever get churny? Did you ever have a situation where the weather caused a little bit of vegetation?
No. We had a few minor windy days, but it wasn't anything severe. The canals, they're just too narrow. They're just too small to develop any real fetch. The biggest problem we had was that one day when we were going back toward Wrenbury, going to that one lock with the one wide open side. And I think it was poor Craig at the helm, and he had a hell of a time controlling the boat and getting it to actually aim into the lock itself.
The wind was coming in the wrong direction, and it kept pushing us into the
far bank.
The far bank. So it was a real difficult time. I think we finally wound up getting him back against the towpath, and then taking lines and leading him, and then taking the boat that way into the canal, because we just couldn't manage it the other way.
Yeah,
I think there was a couple other people there that helped us as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, because it's the lock system and canal boats, we helped the other canal boaters that were having the same difficulty at that same corner.
But that was about the most difficult time that we had. Otherwise, You know, if the wind pushes you, well, in the lock, you've got like 6 inches to go. If you're on the canal, you really don't have very far to go either.
Right, right. When I was in England a while ago, I didn't get on one of those boats, but I noticed that some of the locks were manual. They weren't, not even with a winch, but just you literally lifted the.
Yep. So, yeah, some of the older ones were like that. You lifted the sluice gates.
Oh,
Yes,
one thing that we got from the marina before we went is we actually got keys. And those keys were meant for any lift bridges that we might encounter in some towns where they'd have a roadway going over there. You'd have to get out and you'd have to put the key in there to actually lift up the roadway so you can carry on through. But in our journey on the Four Counties ring, we never encountered that.
Right, right. Well, I thank you both for putting this all together for us. I certainly enjoyed it, and it kind of says to me, oh, I'd love to go. I'm not sure that I will now.
It is fun.
Go. You know what? It's anybody who says, I'd love to do it, do it. Well,
okay, well, maybe I will. Maybe I just will.
May I get a quick question?
Sure.
Hello.
Go for it, Jim.
Where does the water come from that keeps the canal levels up?
They have a series of man-made lakes all along the canal system, and those feed the whole canal system and keep the water levels in check.
Yeah, they keep the waters regulated.
So there's, you know, in the whole canal system, there must be thousands of these little lakes, and they're just fed basically by rainwater.
Oh, okay. Little reservoirs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Diane, before you go, we have another question. Seamus, want to go ahead?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. My computer was unstable for a while. I found it very interesting, your remark about the free house. 50 years ago, I worked in a pub in London called the Mason's Arms in Maddox Street, which is between Bond Street and Regent Street. And it was owned by a brewery, and a husband and wife, they were sort of managing it. And I had other friends who, this is before I came to Canada, who worked in pubs that were run by families, and they were called free houses. That was, they weren't tied to a brewery.
That's
you
right.
could go for a different selection
Mm-hmm.
of ales and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very sad to say that I have relatives in Surrey and other places, and I stayed with them a number of years back, and I went to go down to the I think it was called the Round Moon. They have funny names for pubs.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, the pub is there, but it's closed. People were not, this was in the Surrey Hills. They don't travel like they used to. And just before this program, I researched on the internet. You were correct. Those family pubs are closing down. They're becoming an endangered species, which is a great tragedy.
It is. It's a horrible tragedy because those families, the whole family is there, and the whole family welcomes you, and it's like welcome.
Yes.
And it's like that one little pub, the Anchor pub that we went into, that family welcomed us into their parlor, and it was just, that's how they made their money. Their extra money was welcoming travelers.
Yeah.
And talking about extra money, years ago up in the hills of Devon and Cornwall, Daphne du Maurier country, there was a pub called the Salmon Inn, and I was with friends who are now long gone to the reward, but we were the beneficiaries of what they call a lock-in at a family-run pub, and that was a great night.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and brought back lots of memories of my times in England. Appreciate it.
We have another person, Laurel Green. Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to echo some sentiments of Fred and Dahlia. We actually rented a power boat in France, in Burgundy country, in 2013 with the Dukes from Mimico. and I would do it all over again. Just an amazing journey. And the countryside was very much like what you showed, and the small towns, the ancient stonework, just things that you don't see here. So I just wanted to say, if you're thinking of doing a trip like this, it's certainly worth it.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable. I think the hardest part for me was just literally learning to slow down. And by that, I don't just mean driving the boat too fast. It's just adopting that pace where you're just literally walking through the countryside, seeing things as they pop up, and not really worrying about a schedule or anything like that. Just take the flow.
The 4 days before we wound up in England with Craig and Michelle, we were bashing around Germany. We had family to see in Hanover, friends to see in Berlin, somebody else to see in another city. So we were like mad dashing it because we got delayed by 1 day. So we were a day late arriving in Germany. So the family reunion, we missed that. And then, it was just like rush, airport to airport, train station to train station. And then you finally get on the canal boat and it's like, learn to slow down. Tick over speed, people, tick over speed.
The other thing funny with that was the first meal that we cooked for our friends on the Narrowboat was a thoroughly German meal from stuff we bought when we were in Berlin.
I deliberately bought the groceries in Berlin so I could cook Craig and Michelle a German meal.
So
well, I'm going to cut you off there because it's now 2:30 and there will people who have things to do. But